Hi, welcome to our conversation about workflow registry issues. This is a conversation that's part of the Collegeville workshop on scientific productivity issues. And here with me, I have a team who will introduce themselves. Team?
Hi, so I'm Dan Katz from the University of Illinois.
I'm Kyle Chard from the University of Chicago and Argonne National Lab.
And I'm Rosa Badia from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center. And the other co-author also from my team is Jorge Ejarque, also at BSc.
Thanks so much for joining our conversation today. So can you tell us a bit about the problem that you're working on and why is it challenging and interesting to tackle?
So from my point of view, we have a fairly long history of building workflow systems and giving them to users to make use of. And one of the problems that we've seen, again, in my experience with Swift and now with Parcel, is that the description of the logic is usually fairly easy for the person that's building the workflow because they really understand their application and what they're trying to do. But the connections to the external entities sometimes can be challenging. So in particular, setting up a workflow system so that it is easy to use on one supercomputer and then a different supercomputer when that person may be just learning how to access that supercomputer and figuring out how to, what the authentication is, what the queues are, things like that. And so from my point of view, which maybe was Kyle's point of view originally, I'm not completely sure, we were thinking that the model that Globus has built, which maybe Kyle will talk a bit more about, where the resource owner provides information about the resource and the user just kind of can get that information and make use of it without having to figure it out themselves, was something that seemed like it was worth trying.
Thanks, Dan. Kyle and Rosa, do you have any additional comments about what the problem is that you're tackling to follow up on Dan's point?
Oh, sorry, Lois. Yeah, one thing I'll add is it's not just a case of setting it up the first time and getting all the configuration right. It's also a case of keeping up with a changing configuration. I think the amount of times we've got a script or a user has a script that's working happily on a machine, only to be broken a few weeks later by some change at the system level, the package level, etc. So it's quite a challenging problem for users to keep pace with all these different machines they're using and all the changes that are happening now.
What I would like to add also is that our experience with users, for example, from life science and other areas, is that usually what they build these workflows is workflows that compose multiple binaries, external applications, and so on. And they need tools that help them to, and that they don't have to build a whole wrapper and everything to call these binaries, no? And now, even more with all the trend with the use of containers, I think this our proposal is still more timely.
Right, Kyle, could you, I was going to ask Kyle, can you just say a little bit about the Globus and the endpoint registry and how that kind of came about and what that's led to or how that's been helpful?
Yeah, so I guess Globus is a system that's been around for I don't know, a couple of decades now, building originally grid software, and about 10 years ago moved to a software as a service provider. And the thing that's sort of nice about the Globus model is that the work of configuring and registering and keeping the interface up to date for users, in this case for data management with the Globus Connect service that's deployed there. Essentially, the administrator or owner of the resource or user of the resource registers one of these Globus Connect server or Globus Connect personal endpoints. They define all the metadata about that endpoint, anything from sort of what are the DTNs for transferring data through to metadata to help you find it. And then they basically keep that endpoint up to date. And then users can simply authenticate through the Globus service in the sky and access data on those endpoints without needing to know anything about the differences between the different machines they're accessing, or needing to know anything about the changing configurations, the fact that perhaps the DTNs have been completely swapped out for another, and DTN data transfer node, the DTNs have been swapped out for another set of DTNs, for example.
Right. So I think from my point of view, that's kind of one of the key things that we're thinking about here. One of the key principles is trying to not require users to have knowledge that is more natural from either a resource owner or an application developer. And the second thing, which I don't think we've really talked about, but I'll just mention briefly, is that we work on, Kyle and I work on one system, one workflow system. Rosa works on a different one. There are somewhere between hundreds and thousands of workflow systems at this point, and I think there's more every minute or every second. Every one of us has to basically do the same work to figure out how we're going to connect into these systems. And so we also want to reduce this work that we have to do so that we could just basically try to translate information that's available rather than having each of us as developers have to figure it out as well.
So can you talk a little bit more about the approach that you're proposing, or that you talked about in this white paper, focusing on registry strategies for compute endpoints and applications? Can you elaborate a little bit more about what that might mean to you, or mean to people who are developing applications and would want to use these capabilities?
Right.
Rosa,
So,
do you have comments?
Yeah, whatever, or Dan, whatever. Okay, so say, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I can. No, I think you can start, since the proposal came from you, if you prefer. Dan.
Okay, so since we're having this discussion, let's throw it to Kyle and see if he has anything to say.
I might almost need the question restated after that one. So really the idea is to essentially start with something relatively lightweight, just to start collecting information about the endpoints and applications that are used in workflows. The whole problem of boiling the ocean, I don't think that's something we can feasibly do in the short term, but if we can start collecting information about what does a system in which we want to run a workflow actually look like? What are the important things we need to know? We need to know what's the scheduler system. We need to know where the file systems are. We need to know sort of information about how that scheduler is configured, what attributes you need to be specifying. We need to know about authentication. We need to know about how data gets in and out. So starting to collect that sort of high level information that we would then be able to translate into our own workflow descriptions, ways that our individual workflow systems actually speak to different execution resources. And then perhaps I'll hand over to Rosa to talk about the application side of what we might want to keep there.
Okay, then from the application side, what we would like is that this information about the different components is exposed. So then it would be easier to compose the workflows. No, we would be able to basically define what are the interconnections, how the different components will be called, and then of course the fact that have this registry will make much more easier to execute this component in each of the different machines. No? And this has the advantage for the user in terms of making easier the development of applications, but also for benchmarking comparison between systems. I think it would be great. So we can have the same workflows implemented in the same systems and with the different interfaces, no? And this can enrich the ecosystem of workflows, no? And can help and looking at the different features that everybody has in terms of the collaboration between us will be great, I think.
Right, and I guess just to end this, I think the other question then that comes up is how does this information actually get put into this registry, and how does it get curated and updated? And I think that's something that we will be experimenting with a bit. It's, I think even with the Globus registry, which is certainly very well used, there's a lot of data in there that's been put in by administrators and then not updated, and data that's been put in by users and never really checked by anybody else. And so I think this question about kind of how much much human curation is needed, and how do we actually, on an ongoing basis, make sure that the information there is right and up to date, is going to be a bit of a challenge.
So a follow-up question might be, how do you envision, or do you envision this this registry approach being helpful to promote collaboration among the many diverse teams who are already developing workflow software? That is, could it help our diverse communities work towards some commonalities so they can more effectively collaborate and work towards common interfaces?
So I think if you mean people that are developing workflow systems, then I hope the answer is certainly yes. There's been a bunch of different efforts over time to try to build different libraries and different APIs that would be usable by workflow systems, from, I don't know, things like Drama, which is, I think, still active, but I'm not sure how well it's maintained at this point, to Saga at one point. And a bunch of other things. And it seems like these things haven't really caught on very well outside of the kind of the development team and the team that works with them, although that's probably an issue for a lot of workflow systems in general as well. So I guess, yeah, so my hope would be yes, that by providing information and providing some examples of tools that access that information, it leads different systems to actually use those tools rather than re-implement things. Although, again, as I say that, and as I imagine saying the same thing about workflow systems and being proven completely wrong, I don't know.
Thanks, Dan. So if others in the community are interested in these issues, is there a way for them to get involved in this work?
Yeah, so
Yes, of course.
Sorry, Rosa, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, that we will. I think this is an open proposal. No, I think we join because we have met before, and it was we had also to start this project. No, but I think it's open, and it will be more meaningful if we have more contributions from other workflow engine developers. No, that can enrich the proposal and make it more complete with some requirements or contributions from their side.
Yeah, I think going back to what Dan said before, I think one way that we could perhaps be more successful here than we might otherwise be is to really engage a larger set of the community, both workflow system developers and workflow users. I mean, this is too big of a problem for the three of us to tackle individually in our spare time. So I think having more of the community behind it, working out, well, what are the common pieces of information we need to capture? What's the easiest way to represent it? And how can we start prototyping, adding this support to our workflow systems, I think is probably key to making this successful and actually having an impact.
Yeah, and just, I guess, to add a couple of things to that, this is, again, I feel like from my point of view, at least, this is an idea that came up when I was talking with Kyle probably a year and a half ago. And so we've talked about it in a few different places in some talks. There is a poster that will be presented at the PERC conference in a couple of weeks that is related to this. And we had proposed this actually to start as a joint lab for exascale computing project that was going to be kicked off with a meeting in Germany in April. Of course, that didn't happen. But there still is a project description that will show up on the Joint Lab for Exascale Computing JLESC site at some point. So, so I think, sorry, so with all that, I think we've been trying to talk about this. We've been trying to think about how we could do this, and the more people that are interested and come together, as Kyle said and Rosa said, the better we'll do. So if anybody's interested, I think it would be great to contact any of the three of us, or well, four of us, including Laurie.
Thanks for the information. I certainly believe this is a timely and important topic, so I imagine you'll have many people wanting to communicate more. So any final words before we conclude our chat for today?
I guess from my point of view, as I've been thinking about this, I've also been thinking about other standardization activities that have worked and haven't worked, and trying to think about what the reasons for those are. kind of how we got to kind of having one MPI standard, for example, or having one BLAS interface that just is a standard and it gets used, as opposed to having different people recreate message passing libraries or linear algebra libraries. Well, actually, people do create linear algebra libraries, but they use the same API. So, and so I guess I don't have a good answer as to why some of these work and some of them don't. And so that would be, I think the other thing that would be interesting is if anybody really feels like they understand this well and can help us do the things that will make it more likely that this succeeds, that would be great to hear about as well.
Sounds good. Any comments from you, Rosa or Kyle?
Yeah, from our side, for example, our experience is that this idea can be even leveraged at the application level. We have one group that's a group composed part in BSc and part in IRB that is also in Barcelona that work on specific workflows for molecular dynamics. No? So in this case, it's like they are developing what they call the bio-BBs, biomolecular building blocks. No? And if you think of the idea is the same, they try to offer their users a specific blocks that then can be easier used for the community, in this case, for a very targeted community. No? Our proposal is more generic, but I think it's very important to have this type of tools that can be offered to the communities to build these components that enable an easier development of workflows.
Thanks, Rosa.
Yeah, and I'll just say I think this is a real problem, and it's a problem that's really affecting users and actually impacting the work that they're doing. So I think this is a really important thing we can do from the perspective of helping our user communities. But I think also from the perspective of starting to move towards more sharing and interoperability between workflow systems, of which Dan mentioned, there are hundreds or thousands of them. I think if we can start small with something like this that makes it very easy to see the benefits of sharing information between workflow systems, perhaps we can start moving more towards, like Rosa mentioned there, the molecular dynamics building block type approach, where we can actually start to share more things between our workflow systems. And ultimately, I think that would have a huge impact on our community and our user communities.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed this conversation and look forward to hearing the next steps.
Okay, thanks, Lois,
Thank
as well for doing this.
Thanks, Lois.